Hey guys, City Walk City Wall here, and welcome back to Kobayashi Island. This episode, we're going to start on the city's main harbor, which is going to be on the far side of the island. It's something that I've had planned since I started the series because it's extremely crucial to how the city functions and operates, since we are on an island and have no way to import goods other than by boat at the moment. I want to make sure this area is big enough and connected enough that it will be able to handle pretty much all the cargo entering and leaving the city, because what's here now, a single vanilla harbor, doesn't really cut it. So my main focus here is terraforming and creating sort of a man-made blocky shaped area that the harbor is going to sit on. And then also the road that enters it. I'm taking a good amount of inspiration here from the Tokyo harbor in terms of the shape of the land. Very square, no piers, just sort of like all the big boats pull up to different parts of a very long, very straight series of docks on the sides of these square islands. I initially started out thinking that the harbor would be its own island, but as things were coming together, that was sort of looking weird and a little unnecessary, so I ended up making it into more like a peninsula. You'll see in this footage that there's really a lot of iterations, a lot of changes to the shape of the island that I had to go through before settling on this one, but I think what ended up being there worked out pretty well. The train lines and the roads and how they interact with the hills and the shape of the land was also pretty crucial for understanding how this area was going to come together. I wanted a bridge to get us to the harbor just because it's cool looking and I have this awesome bridge asset that I wanted to use, and that's sort of why I initially wanted the harbor to be on its own island, just sort of justify the bridge. But even though it's a peninsula and you don't necessarily need the bridge, I ended up sort of justifying it to myself by making the terrain around here much more mountainous, so that was kind of the only way to get to the island. While I was laying down the roads and the train tracks to get over here, one of the things that I set up for myself for future episodes was the train line that I talked about a while ago when I was doing some rural stuff, that I wanted to go directly from the harbor to the mountains near the rural areas. I want there to be like a mining town up in those hills and have that directly export the ore to the harbor area for processing via like sort of like a dedicated cargo line. I also think that allows me to justify putting just some sort of like train yard in this harbor area, which I've always wanted to do, even though there's not really a lot of cargo train. I mean, there's no cargo trains now, but because it doesn't connect to the outside world via train, I wanted there to be somewhat of a cargo network on this island. And then also it would double up as sort of a place for passenger trains to be stored and repaired, since it would be connected up to the passenger network as well. So eventually there will be like a dual purpose train yard on this peninsula as well, but not this episode. I hate to be negative, but something happened to me when I was filming this episode that just pissed me off so much. As you know, if you watch the series, I use the Surface Painter mod to paint like dirt texture on the volcano or pavement texture around buildings or in parking lots, and generally it's just like one of my most used mods. And it's not the first time that this has happened, but basically everything that I painted down on the entire island, everything on the map, like halfway through filming this episode, just completely disappeared. And it wasn't even like I had quit the game and loaded back with like new mods or anything like that. It literally just in the middle of playing, I didn't notice it until it was way too late. It just like all of it disappeared. So now I have to go back bit by bit through the entire city and redo everything I painted down, which is a huge pain. So I think after Kobayashi Island, I'm just going to try and avoid this mod entirely, because this is like way too much work, and this is the second time this has happened here on Kobayashi Island, and it's happened to me before in other save games, and just looking through the comments on the mod, it looks like it happens to a ton of other people too. So There's these new network surface assets that are similar to ploppable surfaces, but they're networked, so they use nodes and segments. And so maybe I'll kind of figure out ways to use that and the ploppable surfaces, and just some mixed assets here and there to kind of get everything that I would want done without having to use that mod, because it took me way too long. It took me hours to go through and try and fix all that, which was pretty awful. Speaking of which, I got that network surface asset before I did this episode, which is awesome. And I also finally caved and got the Terraforming Network asset as well. I know people have been suggesting it to me for a while because I've been using the simple pavement road to do the job of the terraforming tool a lot of the times, which has been fine, but it's also a little annoying because when you do use the pavement road to like hold up or down terrain, afterwards you have to go through the traffic manager mod and disable parking on the road so cars don't start parking in weird spaces, and it also causes some issues when you're putting down a road too close to buildings, because sometimes the buildings think that road that you're using for terraforming is really the road that they're supposed to be connected to, and then services can't get to the building and there's dead people, and that causes its own issue. So finally caved, got the terraforming mod or asset, used it a bunch here, and I really like it. I think I'm going to obviously continue using it, even though it's one extra asset. By the way, I've been working a lot on getting my mods and assets together to release as a few collections to everyone. It's an enormous project, especially because I've been migrating over to a new Steam account slowly. So at some point here, I will in fact be able to announce and release a bunch of collections and probably a save game for Kobayashi Island, so you can subscribe to everything that's needed, open up the game, fly around, or even finish the build in your own unique way. Maybe I'll start out by releasing how the game was in like episode 10, for instance, and then later episode 20 and so on, just so that it kind of gives people an option which version of the island you want to work off of. Just go back for a second. The way I'm setting up these collections is slightly different now than how I explained in episode 1 of the series. In that episode, I talked about how I have like 15 or so collections. For example, like a train collection with all the different trains and train stations, or a high density agent building collection, or a ships collection. And if the city, for instance, has trains at all, I'll subscribe to the train collection. The issue with this is like that collection has some American trains, some Asian trains, all different types of stuff, and having all those extra assets when I don't really need them, I only need like one or two, is sort of a waste. So what I decided to do, which I think is going to really help make things easier also for anyone who wants to subscribe and download the save game, is I'm still making collections like that, but I'm also going to be making a Kobayashi Island collection, which will have every single asset that's required to open up this save game. All the buildings, all the trains, all that, anything that could possibly need, it will be in one collection. So the train collection will still have a variety of trains, but maybe I'll only be subscribed to 2 of them. And then those 2 trains will be added to the Kobayashi Island collection as well. So they'll be in 2 different collections, but there's only one collection that I'm actually subscribing all to, and the other ones are just sort of there as like big buckets for assets that I like and maybe would subscribe to for one save game and maybe wouldn't. So I think even though this is slightly more work, it'll mean that I'm subscribing to much less assets at any given time, which is always the goal. And it'll make sharing the save game much easier because someone else won't have to subscribe to 10 different collections. It'll be just like one collection, Kobayashi Island collection, plus the essential mods and assets collection that I'm always subscribed to no matter what. Anyways, enough of that. I'm going to let you guys listen to some music, watch the time lapse, and I'll be back shortly. Hey guys, so the main thing I wanted to get done this episode was the Port of Kobayashi. Sort of like big place that imports and exports goods, has a bunch of big cranes, ships pull up, and has like huge stacks of shipping containers. One of the things that I did that I think turned out really cool was I was finally able to utilize the toll booth assets that I've been trying to work into Kobayashi Island forever. I initially wanted to use them on every highway on-ramp, so that it was like a toll to get on the highway, but they're really big and I wasn't able to really fit them in, so now I've been able to use them here, and basically have them so that anytime you enter the port, you have to pay a toll. I'm not really sure if that's how it would work in real life, but I do know in many places in order to get into a port, you have to go through sort of a checkpoint type thing. Maybe you sign in and you're told where to go or what to pick up, so looks wise, I think this is something a port would have. The other thing that I think is really cool about the way I did this is I have the main road that goes into the toll booth and out of the toll booth. It goes right underneath all the cranes, and that's where you would the trucks go to pick up and drop off goods. I think this is sort of how it would work in a lot of ports where cranes are able to offload containers directly from the ships to the trucks underneath, and I think it's pretty cool looking here just watching all these trucks driving up along the ships underneath the cranes. I did this other thing that I think turned out really cool here too. There are these railway side networks from the Railway Replacer mod. They're like railings that get laid down with nodes and segments, and they're for putting on the sides of elevated train tracks. And I ended up using those to make these like tracks for the cranes. Cranes I know have the ability to sort of shift left or right depending on where the ships are docked. So they usually have track to roll back and forth on. And I think this is an interesting and effective way to do that rather than decals, because you can really see them from a distance. But one of the main problems I was having with this build overall, which you'll see me start to address next episode and in future episodes after that, is this harbor still doesn't appear to import enough to deal with the fact that there's no road connections from the island to the edge of the map. I think this is an issue I'm going to be dealing with for as long as I play Kobayashi Island, where lots of my industrial and commercial buildings are complaining about not having enough goods. And I initially thought that having just more cargo ports would fix this, but it doesn't really seem to. So my next step for trying to address the issue is going to be really beefing up the industry on the island, making lots of unique factories, lots of industrial areas, and just trying to produce way more goods so that maybe my island can eventually be much more self-sufficient and rely less on goods from off the map. So I think next episode I'm gonna work on adding in an ore industry and an oil industry here in the harbor. And then after that, in future episodes, probably work on adding a forestry industry in the mountain pass area, doing that mining town in the mountains, and maybe even going back to the rural areas and adding in some more towns and farms there, so I can really be producing as much raw materials as possible. And then so I can basically have every type of unique factory available here in the harbor. Hopefully that way the city will be able to produce all the goods that it needs. If not, I don't know. Maybe the cargo airport will help. And if not, we may need to take some more drastic measures. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode. That's about it for me. I was really just focusing on this this peninsula, the shape of it, and the roads and the cargo port. Next episode, we'll continue work here, get a lot of industry going, fix up a few roads. So look forward to that. As always, let me know what you thought. If you have any cool ideas or things you wish had been done differently, I always love to hear from you. That's it from me, City Walk, City Wall, and I'll see you all next time.